Hello and welcome to the first episode of Gaming Reviews. This is a new sub-series where Dan and I are going to play a game and we're going to give you our thoughts on it. So think of these as bite-sized extras you're going to get every now and then. For the first episode, I'm talking about God of Weapons, and full disclosure, I received a free review copy of this game from our friends over at GamePress. So just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to GamePress, the developers Archmage Labs, and also the publishers at Ultimate Games. Now, the game is available on the Xbox, and that's a platform I played it on. That came out in June of this year, but it's also available on Steam, and that had a release of September 2023. And there is also a release planned for the PlayStation later this year. Now, what is it? God of Weapons is an arena survival game that fuses roguelike progression, action RPG elements and bullet hell gameplay style all into one single package. Developed by the studio Archmage Labs and published by Ultimate Games, it arrived on the Xbox this year as mentioned, and although I don't typically gravitate towards roguelike games, God of Weapons immediately caught my interest and kept it. True to its roguelike roots, the game starts off by offering a selection of character classes. There's 12 in total, although only 4 are initially available, and you can unlock additional classes as you complete specific in-game challenges. But what I liked about the character selection screen is rather than it being presented as a list, the characters are actually they're little characters outside the dungeon. The ones that are available to you, you can see, and they've got the name. The others are all silhouetted out, so to me, it's a small but clever little visual incentive that gives a little bit of charm and motivation to try to unlock them. Now, the starting characters that are available to you are the Knight, so that's a character that's got a balanced melee combat style. You've got the Hunter, so your more ranged character. You've got the Raven, who's kind of, I would say, is the rogue, and you've got your Warlock, which is your AoE spell damage character. Now, each of these classes have got 3 subclasses, with initially only 2 being accessible. You can obviously unlock the third with in-game progression, as I said. Now, subclasses impact your base stats in both positive and negative ways, and this allows for a little bit more specialization as you move on. You can also see a stats panel that tracks around, I believe it's 18 attributes, including damage percentage, magic power, lifesteal, luck, etc. And this is all influenced by your starting choice, the gear and item choices, which we'll come on to later. So once you choose your character, before you can go straight into the action, you'll also be choosing a starting weapon and an item. So each class will have a unique set. For instance, the Knight has got access to swords, axes and a flail. And their item that you can start with is something called a tattered banner. And that gives armor boosts when positioned adjacent to compatible items in your inventory. And more on the inventory system shortly. So once you've picked your character, your subclass and your starting weapons and item, you move on to the first level. Now, before we get stuck into the game, I just wanted to talk to you about the options regarding your playstyle. Now, the reason I want to highlight the options is because there are some really cool little things you can tweak. So you get the usual language, music, sound and brightness options. But if you head into the gameplay menu, there are a number of features there that can be toggled. And the most probably impactful or important of which is the camera angle. So this will give you a choice of isometric normal, isometric high and top down. So, you know, it might be a minor thing to say to people that you've got those options, but I thought it was really good to see this and select a style of visual element that is more going to be suitable for your playthrough. So there is another option that will have an impact on how you play. So you've got the aiming option, and that can be set to automatic or manual. Again, this is going to be down to personal preference. Now, the core concept of God of Weapons is that your character is ascending a tower. So each level is ultimately a floor in a tower, and you've got to try to get to the end of the 20th. That's your aim. A successful run is you've completed 20 floors of this tower. Each floor sees you attacked by a number of enemies. However, the aim of the game isn't to defeat all the enemies that you're going to come across. Rather, you need to survive the predetermined amount of time on that level, and this ranges from between 30 seconds to 1 minute. Survive the time, you've completed the level. Now, that's going to sound simple, but this is where the things start to get interesting. Once you complete a level, you get taken to a store inventory screen, and the extra layers of complexity start to come into the game here now. So firstly, the inventory screen. This is presented as your existing items and weapons placed onto a grid. Now think of a couple of games like the one that really springs to mind is Resident Evil 4, where you're managing your inventory. You've got to make everything fit. It's that same premise, but this goes a little further. So depending on how well you scored in the level, it determines how many more spaces you can unlock. So around the grid system, there'll be little plus signs. Click on that and you can unlock extra squares in the inventory to give you more space to put weapons. When one is selected, 4 more become available, and it will be random, so it won't necessarily be next to yourself, next to the previous one, but you can unlock or you can re-roll which options are available to you. When you've used up all your extra space unlocks, you then move on to the purchasing of weapons. Now, again, the allocation of the space in the inventory is important because you get a choice of five items. So they'll be a mix of weapons, armor, and items to choose. So items would be potions for healing, etc. Now, the weapons and armor are all different shapes. You've got to make them fit Tetris style into the grid. Now you can rotate them, you can move them up and down. They don't have to be stationary. Once you've got an item in there, you can take it out or you can just rearrange it. But whatever you've purchased, you've got to make fit. So this then becomes a forward planning element, and yeah, you can't just have whatever you want. It has to fit into the inventory. So some of the weapons or armor you get can be more powerful when placed to adjacent items of similar nature. So for example, you may have a dagger that gains more strength for every other dagger that's placed adjacent to it. So again, this interlevel shop / inventory management screen gets again another layer of importance and complexity. So 2 final things on this part of the game before I move on. I've mentioned before with the inventory expansion, you can re-roll for different options if you've got enough gold. And again, if you've got enough gold, you can re-roll your shop items to get new ones. Now, what is another cool little feature is if you see a weapon or an item that you like the look of, but you either can't afford it on this run at the moment, or you can't make it fit into your inventory, you can lock an item. So that item will be locked until you can either purchase it or you unlock it. So again, a cool little thing that just because you can't grab something right now doesn't mean you can't have it in the next level. So onto the main game itself. Firstly, the controls, super simple. Your attacks are automatic, so if you have no enemies around you, then you don't attack. But as soon as you get nearer to enemies, then you're going to auto attack, whether it's ranged or melee. The only other action you've got to think about is a dash button. So as the name suggests, this gives you a quick burst of speed to help you get away from danger or into a safer area. As mentioned, each level is a battle to survive the clock against the wave of enemies. Now, as you'd expect, each wave becomes harder and harder, and this is done in a couple of ways. 1, throws more enemies at you, but 2, you get varying types of enemies. So for example, the first floor or 2, you may just have enemies that move slowly and are shooting projectiles at you. But as you progress, the screen's going to have a lot more enemies, and it's easier then to be swarmed by them. Some enemies will have roll attacks. You're going to then start getting environmental dangers. So a part of the floor will flash red and the ceiling is going to fall down on that area. So what's cool is as you're running around, you're going to also see your weapons on your back. So they'll be hovering on your back. And again, it's really interesting to see the purchases you've made in the interlevel bit appearing in the game. So whilst I've said it sounds really simple, you've got movement, you've got the weapons automatically attacking, you've got a dash button. Because the enemies are non-stop, the game becomes far more about thinking ahead to where you need to move to than it does about holding your ground to start and fight. And as I've said, if you stand and fight, you're going to get swarmed and it's going to be a quick run. Now, to help you during the battles, there are going to be barrels that appear, and the frequency of these can also be affected by items you purchase in the store. Now, these will reveal things like cash, brief invulnerability, and I have to say that's my favorite one. I mean, it sounds obvious because of brief invulnerability. I mean, who wouldn't want that? But when you have got a level that's full of enemies, to get that and then just stand in the middle of them and see the hit points pinging up on the screen, that for me was just perfect. Or you can have explosive barrels that will cause damage to enemies, and you'll see the radius of where that damage is going to hit. So complete 20 levels. There'll be a boss, a mini boss in its finale, but again, you don't need to beat that, not in your first run at least, and you just need to survive the time. Complete that, you've won a run. Now, graphically, the game is fairly similar each level and each run. Yep, you know, there are a number of enemies, but the levels don't change too much other than the size and placement of obstacles. Sound-wise as well, you know, it's absolutely fine. There's not a lot of variation, but, you know, that didn't really affect my enjoyment. As did the visuals. You know, visually the game is great. You know, it's nice and clean. It's just, it would have been great to see a little bit more variety. What is satisfying to see in the game, however, is how your builds change your play. So, for example, one run, I started as a warlock, starting off with an ice wand. And whilst that was good, it was fairly slow and single fire. I then bought a fire wand, which added a further 3 projectiles to my attacks, and a mace that added a closer melee type attack, and so on and so on. So you can see how you can craft a playthrough to exactly how you want it to be. It's you know, again, and I found it quite addictive to see that build of your character progressing throughout the levels. Some weapons will have a stacking effect of a sort. So the ice wand, as I mentioned, its projectiles can grow 10% larger for each adjacent enchanted weapon you have in your weaponry, and so on. So it really does pay to take close care when you are picking your weapons and your items in between builds. So to sum up, basically, I really did enjoy my time with the game. It really nails the just one more go feeling, both in how quick the game plays. I mean, a run you might not get all the way to the 20th level, but as I said, each run is at most going to be a minute with the interlevel purchases and inventory management. Or a run might end a lot quicker because you've not been successful, as I found out a number of times. It's that one more go, and by the time you've realised, you've probably been there an hour, a couple of hours, because you're trying to nail that perfect run through. The only downside, as I've said, is ultimately it could have a bit more variety. And the initial info given can be a bit sparse, so maybe it's me and I missed something, but a little bit more of a tutorial at the start would have helped. Something I initially didn't pick up, and again, I'll hold my hands up if I missed it. There's an armory section, so when you pick your character, you go through the door for the tower. There's another section where there's an armory, and what you can do there is unlock items depending on what you've collected so far to make them appear as random options or random chance items in the shop. So, you know, it could be a potion of some sort that you wouldn't normally get. As soon as you unlock that in the armory, it's then got a percentage chance of appearing in this shop. There's also a monolith on the outside when you're doing your character selection, where you can use wishes which are collected to unlock new weapons, etc. So again, it could be me just being distracted, but it was just something else I wanted to put out there. So yeah, really, I mean, at time of recording, the game is £4.99 on Steam and £8.39 on Xbox. So the negative points I mentioned, or the criticisms, really are minor for the price you're paying and the amount of fun. I mean, that's what I want to say. I did have a lot of fun playing God of Weapons. So for me, especially as someone who's not necessarily someone who's a roguelike person, I would recommend it if you have got at least a passing interest, or you do like them, or you like those games with that time attack quality. I mean, my final line really would be, it's the perfect pick up and play type of game. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the first episode there of gaming reviews. Keep an eye out for more of them, and just to finish off by saying thank you again to Game Press and Archmage Labs, and yeah, make sure you're subscribing to us for all future content.